Thank you for the introduction. Yeah, my name is Kevin A. McGrail. My initials are Cam, but many people know me more by my initials. In fact, that's really how I've gone since I was about 14 years old. So, in fact, I work in spam assassin project is something I have very close, near and dear to my heart. So this off-brand Canadian spam called Cam is real. That's not a Photoshop. So it's my avatar. I do, participate in LinkedIn quite a bit. So I do encourage people that are interested, find me on LinkedIn, reach out, tell me you heard about me here, ask me questions there. I love talking to people there and whatnot. As I mentioned, I do volunteer at the Apache Software Foundation. Very proud of my work there. Additionally, for my day job, I work at a company called InfraShield. We do high value, high target cyber physical security for critical infrastructure. If you guys need any of those services, please reach out to me there. But also, as he mentioned, I do volunteer for Google because we all know they are hurting on money and need volunteers. But I am a Google G Suite top contributor. I am a Google developer expert and also an ambassador. So what that means is basically I'm a peer among equals that has distinguished myself in a way of knowing a lot of stuff. So Google helps give information about what's going on. One of the questions I got asked was how much information we'll be able to share and that kind of stuff with what you're doing there. So, with the Google Developer Experts program, I am under an NDA, so I will only share information that is publicly available. If there's questions you ask that I can't answer, please do understand that I can't answer them. But I've worked really hard to cross-correlate the information that is available with what's publicly available so that you guys have the best snapshot of what I can give you for what's happened and what I think will be important. Because, for example, over the last few years, I really have been very pleased with the way Google is going and what they do. And we'll talk a little bit about Google scale and things like that. But Google has really made some bets that I think are going to really start paying off in the next few years. So, as many people know, Google had problems with their firewalls and things like that many years ago. Instead of buying new firewalls, they decided, why don't we run our own fiber network and protect things? So they have a worldwide network that isn't matched by other companies. And that's the type of Google scale that we see. That will really start to help them, I think, in this year and going forward to differentiate themselves as they start to move forward. So I don't know why I have two slides about me, but in any case, there's some more about me should you want to know, but there's my link that's bigger. Please do feel free to reach out. So what I wanted to start with first is first quarter 2020. So originally I did this slide deck in Thunder Bay, Ontario. Parts of this were done. This was originally written to get started with the year. So it was written in February to kind of go through the first 3 months of what was going on. But I thought it's a good starter point before we get into the lots more material. I'll try and break it up with some stories, some interesting stuff, maybe some at least one or two demos. To try not to have you guys listen to me over and over again for an hour plus. But I will tell you the story. So I did mention that I am a GDE. I am under NDAs with Google. And so I thought I would tell this story a little bit to try and explain things. So many times when I'm testing things for Google, I have access to it sometimes years before it becomes public. Unfortunately, I also have the memory of a squirrel. So I have to oftentimes go talk to a Googler and say, hey, is this new product that I've been testing or this new feature, is it publicly available now so that I can talk about it? And one of those was the what's now known as the Google Home. So I had been testing it. They had asked me how it was going. I said, oh, it's going great. I find that I'm very polite to it. I ask it a question, I tell it thank you, etc. And the Googler I was talking to said, oh, you're going to love this. We're working on a product called Google Pretty Please. And Google Pretty Please is designed to help children be more polite and things like that. So I said, that's awesome. Can I talk about that publicly on stage? Because I was just about to give a speech. And they went and got some approval. They said, yes, it's going to be in GA later this week. General availability, it's GA. So go ahead and talk about it on stage. So I was on stage, I was talking about it, and I proceeded to talk about Google Pretty Please and explained it as a product that will make your children more polite to their future overlords. that's the only time Google has ever really gotten mad at me for something that I've said. They were like, could you please not refer to us as your children's future overlords? But that aside, I do have to be careful because, for example, I was talking to the new PM of Google hardware. I was explaining about some of the testing I was doing with some of their hardware that had been done with the Pixelbook, in fact. And I asked him if the secret Titan key that was built into it was public information yet. And the PM, granted he was new, asked me if, actually said, oh my gosh, there's a secret Titan key built into the Pixelbook. So sometimes even the stuff that we get looped into isn't shared even among Googlers. So I have to be very careful. The final thing I'll leave you with is a term that I've coined called Google-splaining. If you guys are familiar with the, kind of the anti-sexism term, of mansplaining, this builds on it. So I find like when I'm talking to my Google Home, my kids will try and Google-splain for me, and I'll say something and Google won't understand it, and they'll try and shout over me to get Google to do it correctly. And I'm like, I tested this hardware to describe it. You don't need to Google-splain for me. So now you guys can use that term in your conversation when you're interacting with Google hardware. So don't Google-splain. All right. So this started off with the fact that early in the year, we had the Consumer Electronics Show, CES, was in January. There was no new hardware announced at that event. That was kind of interesting, but there was kind of a foresight for the rest of the year that was set where Google was really going to be working hard on artificial intelligence and the assistant. There are some neat things that you can do, like in fact, I got to make sure I have nothing that's going to announce off. So you can say things like, hey, Google, read this page. Hey, Google, turn off the lights at 6 a.m. Hey, Google, leave a note. If you're somewhat evil like me, you can do things that I enjoy doing, which is if you're at a party, tell Google to set an alarm for 4 a.m. in the morning. Things like that are lots of fun to wake up the hosts for the party at 4 a.m. So additionally, continuing along, there were some additions, the ability to speed dial. You can now do things like, hey, Google, call mom, things like that. And additionally, from a privacy standpoint, there's some really neat things in there that you can say, hey, Google, that wasn't for you if it starts, picking up on a conversation that you didn't mean for it to do. Additionally, one of the neat things that I really enjoy, I'm visually impaired. I'm losing my eyesight. But they have some really cool interpreter modes. So on the fly, Google Live can transcribe what you're hearing. It can do it with Hangouts Meet. There are more features coming to do it and translate it on the fly into other languages. Really looking forward to that getting better and working well. Let's see. Live transcripts. Okay, so this is kind of interesting. This is what I was talking about, where when you're in Hangouts Meet, you can turn on live captions. It'll translate it. It's very useful for meetings too, because one of the things it'll do is it'll tell you who's talking. So if you don't know everybody on the Meet or whatnot, it'll preface it with their name. Very nice and easy to do. Additionally, they are building, so if you have a Google Pixel phone, the recorder app on it was built with transcriptions as well, so you can dictate things on your phone very quickly. And the live transcription is coming as well. Lots of features coming on that. You'll see the ability with that link there. But one of the hints I wanted to give people about the transcription that I find a lot of people mess up with is just the concept of they're talking to it and the transcription doesn't work very well. So two things with that I want to point out. One, do more transcription. It will learn. It is very smart. It is based by artificial intelligence, neural network models, etc. So it will learn things better. The second thing that that I want to make sure people know is that what you often get is people that go, they're like, hey, Google, do something, and it doesn't understand them. And so instead of what they do something they shouldn't do, which is they raise their voice and they start going, hey, Google, do something. And what happens when you raise your voice is you actually do something called clipping. So you can see this graph that I've got on the screen, a little chart, nothing fancy. What it shows you is the blue is a normal sine wave for sound, and it's below the thresholds for the sound. The green one represents when you've talked too loud. And so what happens is that the green wave goes up, hits a ceiling, and becomes a straight line. That is what's known as clipped. And if you imagine this clipping going very much, you basically end up with straight current. And straight current is what blows speakers. So if you've ever heard the term like somebody blew their speakers, that used to happen because you turned up the volume too loud. The signal wave to the speaker became straight current, and older speakers, 50, 60, probably even years longer than that, didn't have any type of anti-clipping protection. It's pretty trivial just to ground that signal over to go away and just get rid of the signal. And so these days it just causes distortion. But that distortion and that clipping is what happens. And so one of the things that I recommend to people is actually start whispering to your phone if you're trying to do transcription. It's a great trick, works really well, and just kind of gets everything going. So Peter, if you're there, are we coming in loud and clear? Just want to make sure that we're all good on the recording.
Yeah, everything's fine. Thank you.
Okay, excellent. So one of the things that I will try and put in here, I'm not going to talk too much about things like the security features that Google's added. I'm not going to talk about a lot of the admin features. Most of this is to try and get you guys a taste of what Google's added this year that I think might be interesting. Any of that other stuff I'm always happy to talk about as well, but I didn't think it would make a very fun presentation. Some of the good stuff that we're seeing this year is we're seeing things like Google Stadia. That is their streaming platform for games. There's also some neat stuff coming from NVIDIA where you can actually use a cloud-based instance of NVIDIA, and they have all the GPUs up on the cloud, and instead you're just doing a screen share. So you can actually end up playing some pretty decent video games on an old Chromebook, for example. There's a little bit of lag there, so hardcore gamers won't like it. But I do like to warn parents that this feature is out there because sometimes they buy Chromebooks for their kids for school and think, oh, they can't play games on it. But that's changing rapidly this year. Interesting thing there, Google has canceled Android tablets, so at the moment there's no more scheduled at the moment. That doesn't mean that aftermarket companies won't do it, but not currently planning any for 2020. I was kind of surprised by that. And then again, as I said, it looks like, and looking back over the last 9 months as well, Google's really in on AI. We're going to talk about some of the things they've been doing on their AI enhancements. They're doing a lot to try and make Google Assistant work better, bring AI features into different products. And they bought Looker for $2.6 billion US earlier this year. So that's all part of their process. I think that they're really, really building on the AI. However, an interesting feature that most people may not know about is what's called the Google Graveyard. There's a website called Killed by Google. You can go look at it. It has little tombstones and little guillotines for showing what products are going to be canceled or are canceled already. And so they did announce quite a few back in January. Particularly sad for myself is they are canceling the Google Cloud Print. Really like that product. I'm looking and experimenting with other products like Thin Print to try and replace that. But we'll talk more about the Google Graveyard at the closing of my talk as well. But if you're not familiar with that, the Killed by Google website, it's not officially a Google website, but it's very useful if you're talking about something to know if it's killed or if it's slated to be killed. In fact, I'll go ahead and click on the link so you guys can kind of see it. So, Killed by, so you can see App Maker will stop working in January 2021. Google Cloud Print will stop working in December. And then you can see little tombstones. And over the last, nearly 2 decades, Google has killed quite a few products. So neat website, lots of good information there. Okay. So the elephant in the room is, of course, Google's had cloud layoffs. Their Google Cloud is the third runner behind Azure and AWS. But they are doing well. And as I mentioned before, I'm very impressed by Google's approach to what I call planet scale stuff or Google scale stuff. I think they're well positioned where other companies aren't. Most companies don't sit down and say things like, our network is insecure, so let's run our own network all around the world. I like to point out, for example, on that, Google has 2 people who work for them who do nothing but design cabling that is shark-proof. So I would love to see their business cards and know what their titles are. But they've designed underwater fiber that apparently the electromagnetic fields around that cable attract sharks. And so they've designed the cabling to be, not nibble-proof, or to be nibble-proof, from the sharks, things like that. That's the kind of solution that Google's really working on that I think are pretty amazing. So They are focused on international growth and AI is what they've said. And obviously the pandemic is really kind of affecting everybody around the world. But they do have more new features that were announced before the end of March. And then we'll kind of go into our after March kind of section. So, they're refining the search in Gmail. They call this chips. So basically you do a search, and then after you've done the search, you can click little chips and refine the search. Very, very interesting, useful feature to try to narrow down your search. You don't have to think about it and then redo the search over again. Instead, you can kind of do a search and click some stuff to narrow it. Additionally, a feature I really like is the out of office is now available in more locations. Where you'll see this is, like, for example, if you're inviting somebody to a calendar or you're hovering over their email address while you're writing an email, it will come up and say they're out of office. So it can be really useful to give that insight when you're doing things instead of, for example, waiting for an email that comes bounced back that says, hi, I'm out of the office until October 9th or whatever. Additionally, a big thing was Google Meet now works in Safari. Meet and through this pandemic is something that I'll focus on a lot. It's a great tool. They're adding a ton of features to it and really trying to make it so that people can use it well. So more updates. You can now log into Hangouts Meet. We'll talk about that name change there, but you can use a phone for audio. So so you can have a presentation and then use a phone to back up audio into it. Very, very nice, useful feature. Additionally, G Suite's add-ons are now in general availability for, let's see, so as of March, they were general availability for Calendar, Gmail, and Drive. So if people are writing add-ons and things like that, they're in the sidebar on the right, and you can use them to add a lot of functionality there. Additionally, one of the really cool things is, in addition to being able to manage Android, iOS devices, so like your phones, basically what used to be kind of considered mobile device management, is now in the enhanced device management. You can now do Jamboard devices, and you can do Windows 10 boxes. So that just continues the ability to help with networks, help with commercial systems to make things protected. If there's any administrators on the call, this is really good because one of the things, the approach I take to cybersecurity is that users can do no wrong. It's my job to protect users from both themselves and from bad actors. And so guardrails or baby bumpers or whatever you want to refer to them are good because the goal here is not to stop their productivity. The goal is to enhance their productivity and protect them from damage that bad actors or themselves might do. And if you convey that to the users that you're on their side and whatnot, it really helps a lot. I can pontificate a lot about how to be a good system administrator, but that's one of the ways that we do it. So all of this before March is one of the things, but the final thing I'll mention are these two things. Is if you're using a Hangouts Meet hardware and you plug in HDMI, it will automatically figure out that you're doing it and will allow you to do high quality video and stuff like that. We're going to tell you about Present to Tab now also works with high quality video and audio. You guys will see a live test of that in a minute. And additionally, you can now use your Android phone. Actually, last year in April, you could do that. You could use your Android phone as a security key for the two-step verification, which is Google's multi-factor authentication. You can now do that with an iPhone. And as I mentioned, all of this, all I've gotten you through is February, basically. So this is the before March. Now we're going to get into the section of March through August. But if there's any quick questions I can jump on, Peter or anybody out there can, Peter or Paul, I think. Any questions?
Kevin?
Yes.
There actually is a question from Thomas. He's asking, is there a response to the Apple building a search engine and ongoing lockout from competition from the Apple platform? Do you have anything on that?
Yeah, so that's interesting. So that's probably dealing with the Unreal and Fortnite battle with Apple. So Apple takes a cut of 30% from the Apple Store. Google, I believe, does a similar thing with their developers as well. So I think it's almost the exact same percentage. It's an interesting thing. Most of what I've heard is that Apple and Google are pretty standing firm on the fact that, the percentage is fair. They do a lot of work to vet apps, to make sure they're available, to do testing, to provide the ecosystem. and whatnot. So I have not heard if Google's planning to do anything. I do think it'll be interesting for consumers and developers whether or not you start to see some, price competition. Google going to 29% or whatever. Even might be a bit of a salvo. But in the United States, one of the political things that's occurring is that the Department of Justice has been running a anti-monopoly case against Google. Excuse me. It has not been filed. The expectation is that they have stated they want it to be filed in October. So I don't think you're going to see much out of Google related to this because the Department of Justice is already looking at Google for anti-monopolistic behaviors that they are concerned about. So a lot of it is very, very hyper-political. So does that help, Tomas?
I think that answers that part. The other part was about Apple building an own search engine. Or a rumor, I guess.
Yeah, I have not heard much about that rumor. Apple has great engineers and great programmers, and so we'll have to see what they do. Anybody who used to use Apple Maps for a long time knows how bad their rollout was. So there's a lot of learning to be done in running a good search engine, and Google's been doing it for about 2 decades now. So right now it's just a rumor as far as I know. So, all right. So March through August. So I want to do a demo here. I'm going to do the present in a tab spoiler that I talked about. So we'll see if this works. So I'm going to go ahead and go out of that. I'm going to turn off my stream for a second. This might really be interesting to see going from Meets to YouTube and Facebook, but I'm going to click stop here on my presentation. I'm going to go to the presentation. I'm going to present a tab. And while I'm doing that, I will tell you the reason I'm doing that. So when you're presenting a Chrome tab, it will show you high quality video, but I've got to actually move it to the same Chrome video, or excuse me, the same Chrome window. So now that I've done that, I am going to do a Chrome tab. There we go. I'm going to present, actually I got to launch that. So let's go ahead and launch that. All right. I got to play an ad here. Sorry, it's very boring, I'm sure, to watch this. All right, so in the US, we have a bit of a prank that is called Rickrolling. Anybody? Paul, are you familiar with Rickrolling? Have you ever heard that term?
No, not really.
All right, so Rickrolling is basically when people will advertise things. So say, for example, they advertise a video as, come learn about Apple's new search engine. And instead of the video being about Rickrolling, they will play a song by a guy named Rick Ashley. So let's go ahead and see if this works. So you guys seeing my tab here?
Yeah, it works.
Okay, so when I hit play, you should actually hear video. So Sam, Paul, how was that? Were you able to see the video? Were you able to hear the sound?
Yes, fully.
Excellent. So this is a new feature that Google is pushing. It's available in the Present Chrome tab. We can do another one here. Let's see. So I think I picked a German band. So let's see. I tried to find another one. In fact, maybe somebody there knows, but there's a wonderful video with what I would call a boy band that dances all over Berlin. It translates as like Berlin in the winter, but I can't for the life of me find it. It's like a rap song. I really like it, but couldn't remember the name of the band, unfortunately. All right, let's do my presentation of the correct tab. Let's do a Chrome tab. So here you should be seeing the video now, and so most people don't know Alphaville is actually German, but if you're old like me, you know that. But a really cool feature. I'll go back to my slides now, and let's do a Chrome tab. So this new feature is kind of interesting. It really opens up the world of what you can do during a video. They've made a lot of changes in slides to try and help with videos. And are we back to the slides, Peter? Okay.
Yes, we're back.
All right, so that's kind of the things. All right, let's take a break. Maybe people can do it. So maybe somebody on the thing, but maybe the YouTube, Facebook. If I was giving a face-to-face speech, this is where I usually like to give out a small prize or something like that, but that's not going to happen, unfortunately, this time. But I do look forward to, Wiesbaden, visiting in person, giving a talk, when the pandemic is over. But can anybody tell me the name of the first all-electronic computer? So, Sam, it's up to you to monitor the things. Tell me if anybody gives it to us. All right, Paul or Peter, do you know? Sam, do you know?
What was it? This big thing, wasn't it this German engineer name? Yeah, here, Thomas says SUSE Z1.
So, that's interesting. So so that, to my knowledge, that is not the correct answer, but this is, I won't necessarily say I'm 100% correct. So the answer I would give is ENIAC, which was the electronic numerical integrator, and computer. There are two things about that I'll mention. So first of all, for the programmers on the call, ENIAC is and the computers around that time period were the origin of the term for a computer bug, because a vacuum tube, what the younger kids on this call may not realize, effectively was a manual transistor, essentially a light switch, a 0, 1, a single bit of storage. A transistor, which I think I think a Pentium, for example, has like 3 million transistors on it, to go back to an older processor. So one vacuum tube was a single transistor equivalent, and a bug got into one of those vacuum tubes and caused it not to act correctly. So computer debugging was literally taking a physical bug out of the system because there was a bug that made a transistor not work correctly, or a vacuum tube in this particular case. The reason I'd say that might not be correct, I would like to research that more. Let me know if you can find out if ENIAC beats that computer or not. The reason I mention that is that a lot of times, especially in the pre-Cold War kind of era, things that happened in Germany and in Russia, for example, weren't always well publicized or were fought over. So, for example, if you want to get into a big controversy, is look at who broke the speed of sound in an airplane. The Russians believe it was one of their colonels flying a plane. The U.S. believed it was Chuck Yeager flying a plane. So, who's right is, one of those fights of the history books. So, all right. So before I get a little bit too long into this, actually, that's totally wrong. This is the resources is later on. I reordered the slides at the last minute. That was a mistake. This is the post-March stuff. I'll get to the resources at the end. But so some of the things that you have this week, this year, that I'm really excited about. Google Groups has gotten a lot of changes. For anybody who uses Google Groups, there was a lot of people upset because it hadn't really seen much love. It hasn't had a refresh. It didn't get a material design update. Material design is that kind of standard look and feel with Google that has like the plus button down in the bottom right hand corner and things like that. So they're finally getting that. They add shared group calendars. They're adding in improved mobile features as well. So this started in May. And you're getting the ability to use collaborative inboxes in Google. So in Groups. This is really good if you have things like, support at, and you're emailing that. You can have support at via group. You can have a bunch of people maintain that list, use it as a collaborative inbox, make sure your customers are taken care of. So it's really nice that Google Groups is finally getting some TLC this year. Tons of stuff in Google Docs. These are just a taste of some of the things that I thought were quite interesting. Some of the things you get is you do get the ability to do previews. So you can hover over top of links. You'll get previews of what they're going to do. That works in both the web and mobile, so you don't actually have to click on it to do it. Additionally, if you're writing Google Docs, you can fix an image in a document, so all the text will flow around it. You don't have to worry about like images getting moved around unexpectedly. So that just continues the ability to use Google Docs to do 99% of your work in a day-to-day basis. So you don't have to fire up other tools like Microsoft Word, which is a great product, but you can start to do more with images there. Again, AI coming in, you're going to see tons with autocorrect and smart compose. In fact, they have switched the smart compose, Yeah, smart compose and autocorrect, I believe, are both now switched to a neural network model that they really feel is improving their capabilities on that. So even though those features were launched in February, I think just last month they switched it over to a neural network model. So that's a different type of AI engine, if you think about it that way, much better performing. And additionally, you'll see anything I've marked into development is technically these are publicly available information, but you're not going to find these easily. So these are things they're working on that I can talk to you about. One of the things that's kind of neat is they're leveraging what they call domain-specific data to make spelling suggestions better. What does that mean? What that means is, say, for example, at your company, you use a constant word all the time or a specific acronym, things like that. It will start learning the data that you're using specifically to make your spelling better. So instead of changing something that you guys are always doing to something that the rest of the world is doing, it can use your domain-specific data. So really, really cool, especially for those of us who work in technology. We use a lot of acronyms and a lot of special terms that aren't used, just in our standard languages. So this will help a ton. Additionally, they're doing link suggest. So if you're writing something, they can help suggest a link. You don't have to go find it. This is great for writing reports and things like that. And you say, oh, I'm looking for this slide deck, and it can help you suggest what that slide deck will be, so you can link it better. Additionally, Google Editors. So the Google Editors is kind of the generic term for doc sheets and slides. So instead of saying doc sheets and slides, you just say Google Editors. So there's a couple of neat things in there. So for example, you guys are seeing my tab, so I'll go ahead and hit escape. So what they've done is they've got a new save status. So up here, do you see this little cloud thing? This will spin while you're making changes. So I should be able to make a change. I don't know if I have edit rights on this now. I've only got view rights on it right now. But this little tiny cloud icon will spin. It'll say saving, things like that. Other neat thing you can do is you can now click on that icon, and you could say, you could go offline with it and turn it on. So if you knew you were going to work on the slide deck while your computer was off the internet, you can go ahead and just click on that little cloud. The old way that you used to have to do was have to go down to File and find it, Document Offline, I think somewhere in here, but it's somewhere in there hidden. Now you can just click on the little icon. Additionally, some really cool feature, doesn't sound that cool, but Google Sheets added the ability to sort and order by color, or background color especially. This is really cool because, like, for example, let's say you're a cybersecurity person like me, you can go ahead and mark certain vulnerabilities as like yellow, green, and red, things like that, and then you could sort by the background color, and it will group all the greens together, all the yellows, and all the reds. Really kind of a neat feature that can help people. I think, especially me as a programmer, I didn't really think about it. I would have thought, like, I would have put a sort column or something in there, but the ability to just flag it by color is very visually strong and easy to do programmatically. So really cool feature. Google Drive, one of the cooler features this year is you can now do shortcuts in your Google Drive. So if you have a folder or a file that's on Google Drive and you want to add it to somewhere else, instead of making a copy of it, you can make a shortcut to it. This is great. Like, for example, I'm working with a customer right now that they want to have an all staff resources drive. And so in that drive, we're adding shortcuts to these myriad other resources that are spread throughout Google, so that staff can go to that one drive and see a whole bunch of resources. Additionally, in beta right now is the ability to share folders from shared drive. This has probably been the #1 feature request for about the last 2 years, dealing with team drives, now known as shared drives, is the ability to share a specific folder. Before this, you had to create a new shared drive with that other person shared in it, which was really a pain. And especially before shortcuts, you ended up with the thing with making multiple copies of files, losing your source of truth. Those kind of issues were big. But with shortcuts, the nice part is it makes a shortcut. It's linked to the real copy. You can then update the thing in one place. It updates everywhere that the shortcut is listed. And the shortcuts will enforce the permissions that are on the base file. So it doesn't, just making a shortcut doesn't bypass the security requirements of Google. So really cool feature. Another neat thing, I haven't seen this yet, but if anybody out there uses the integrated development environment called Monaco, Google Apps Script is going to get an IDE powered by Monaco. So that'll really help a lot, because right now it's very old school, adding debugging statements and things like that to scripts if you write Google Apps Script, which is just a very, very powerful tool to extend Google Drive and Gmail to do things that you want to do. Finally,
Kevin, just
yes, sir.
one question.
Yes.
One question from the audience. So, would you be able to share the shortcut feature right now?
Sure. Yeah, no, absolutely. So let me go ahead and go back. I will stop presenting. All right, and let me present now, and I'll just do my entire screen. All right, so now I don't know if it's enabled on this one here, but I'm just going to go to Drive here. Actually, I should use a different account. Hold on a second. I can use this one here. So in Drive here, I'm at my shared drive. I'm going to go to, let's just pick one here. So find something that's not sensitive. Well, let's make a new drive. That'll be easier. So I'm going to make a GDG, and let's just GDG, easy enough. So now I have a thing called GDG. I'm going to go over to my drive here. I'm going to find my presentations where I keep a lot of my presentations at. I'm going to right click on the GDG Denver, which I think I did correctly. And I'm going to do add shortcut to drive. I'm going to do shared drives. I'm going to scroll down to that GDG I just created, hit add shortcut, and I can now go to my shared drives, go down to GDG, and you can see I've got a little shortcut there with a little arrow going to that. I can now load that up, and I've got the file there. So
okay, cool, thanks. So
absolutely.
If you are now running a search in this shared drive, will you be able to find it as well based on the shortcut?
So I believe so, yes. One of the interesting things that you can't do is you can't find shared drives in search. I don't have any insight if they're going to fix that, but I believe they're going to. But I do believe shortcuts work just like anything else. So, and like I said, they ripple down the security and everything, so they're quite useful. Okay.
Yeah, thanks a lot also from Martin, who raised this question. Thanks.
Absolutely, you're welcome. Like I said, it is a great feature. Really looking forward to it. I think it's going to really make a change in a lot of the customers that have been kind of living without the ability to share folders and share drive and without being able to do shortcuts. So we're already seeing it change the way customers are using Google Drive. Finally, the last thing that I think is kind of cool, if anybody out there does workflow management, there will be, and it's in beta now, is the ability to request approvals for documents and then lock them to specific approval versions. So like, for example, you could write a Google Doc, you could send it to your boss and say, hey, does this look good? He could approve it, and then you can lock it to that version to say this was approved by Bob and whatnot. So that I think is really important for a lot of companies that do things. Additionally, a new announcement, by the way, this whole presentation goes through September 1. We'll talk about how you can get new announcements. But for example, on August 31st, this just went general availability, is the ability to share Google Drive things with people who don't use Google. Apparently, there'll be some sort of lightweight authentication flow. There's some discussions around pins that we'll talk about. I haven't actually seen the general availability version of this quite yet. As I mentioned, it just went live, and it has not rolled out to my sandbox yet to test it. But you can read the website about it. Again, the links are all there, kind of neat. Another thing that's in development and really quite neat is some people don't realize, but you can add metadata to files. What that metadata can be useful for is just adding extra information. So for example, if you're a photographer, you might want to add extra information to a video, such as, who owns the rights to it or what's in the photo, things like that. Or, for example, I do cybersecurity work. So sometimes we want to mark stuff as sensitive, or the ability that it's non-sensitive, things like that. So we can, handle its controlled release. And with the data loss protection, or DLP, you can configure DLP policies based on that metadata. So you can mark that if something is marked as sensitive, it can't be emailed, for example. Really great feature, and something that has been us before. So I worked at one place that was publishing the list of all the cacao crops for South America. And it was all marked as sensitive but unclassified, or SBU. And it was all in Spanish. And when it was translated from Spanish to English, they translated SBU to USB, like Universal Serial Bus. And the interesting thing is that then that got around all of the filtering. but the metadata that was attached to the file that marked it as sensitive but unclassified saved it from going out, because even though the classification markers were removed from the document, they weren't removed from the actual metadata. So something kind of interesting. Additionally, as I talked about before, with the high quality video and audio for the present in a tab, for the people out there like me that are speakers, you now have an access checker in slides. It'll tell you if all the audio and video that's inserted into a slide is going to work correctly. I didn't actually insert any specific videos into my slides. I did a different thing because I wanted to show you YouTube, but I think it's really cool. So like, if you're a teacher or you're a speaker and you want to show a 2 or 3 minute clip, which I think I do have one in here that I want to show you guys, you can just click on that clip and play it for 2 or 3 minutes. The video and the sound comes through. You get back to your presentation. So kind of neat. This one, I think is kind of interesting. Google Plus, I think, is one of Google's failures really in the last couple of years. They really tried to push it back starting in around 2012 to be the fabric of their underpinning of their entire offering. They tried to do things where you'd have a single avatar, it'd be on G+, etc., but it just didn't work. And so they pulled it back from general release for consumers. It's available for companies. Largely use it for your internal communiques and social platform for a company internally. It's been rebranded as Google Currents. And I think they're dialing, this is my opinion, but I think they're dialing back some of that underpinning of it being the social fabric. So now finally, there'll be a single profile photo for your entire account. Before this, there used to be ways like Gmail would have one profile, G+ would have a different one, and you could end up with different profile photos throughout Google, especially if you're on a G Suite domain. You're going to see that, I think, go away and finally be a unified single profile photo. And there's some information about that for the admin controls. Let me get a frog out of my throat. All right, 11:45. Sorry, my time. By the way, I was very sad to read that this was your Tech Talk and beer, because it is not even noon here in the United States. So I cannot join you in having a beer, but I do look forward in person one day to have a beer and do one of these Tech Talks. And I've been told as I get drunker and drunker, my speech becomes more eloquent and better. Now it doesn't, just, but anyway, back to the topic. Gmail. So creating and using multiple signatures. So this is a neat feature. It's really useful if, like, for example, you respond in different scenarios, you have different titles, or you handle things in one mailbox. You can now reply to individual emails with selecting a different signature. Pretty useful for certain things, especially like, one of the ways I like to use it, I have an internal and an external one. So the internal one has more information about how people can get a hold of me. My external one has less information and more appropriate for external use. So things like that are really great to do with it. Another big thing Google's working on a lot, and I think I have a video for that. Yes, I do. Is the integrated workspace for Chat, Meet, Gmail, and Rooms, plus Tasks and Keep. So this has been a big change that you might have noticed over the last few weeks. It's been happening across the web and on Gmail, web and mobile platforms. What you started seeing is things like Hangouts Meet, or just Meet, is now part of Gmail. You've probably been seeing on the left-hand side that Gmail and Keep and Rooms for chat are all integrated on the left-hand side. That's what they call their integrated workspace. They're trying to bring more visibility to things while you stay in Gmail. And for those of you out there using iPads, Gmail has announced that they support multitasking, so you can pull up Gmail alongside other apps. So that's kind of neat, really cool, especially if you're sitting there like dual screening and you want to keep chat on email while watching Netflix or something like that. So we'll go ahead and I'm going to switch my sharing again and back to the type of sharing that will allow me to do a single tab. So hopefully they'll add something to more seamlessly switch between this. All right, so hopefully you guys are now seeing my tab. So rather than try and explain this new integrated Gmail, here is a very short video from Google, and it should show you the way that I did the access checker in the slide and whatnot. So I'll play it for a second, and we'll just tell me if we have sound, and then I'll finish it.
Email, chat, voice.
All right, so are you guys work? Okay, so I'll let this finish, and you guys can in a few more seconds, you'll know a lot more about it
Video
than I can
calling,
do.
files, and tasks are the foundation of how we work. But because work happens in so many places, it's hard to stay on top of what's important. In the new integrated Gmail, we not only bring the core elements of work together, we make them better together. Now you can access chat, meet, documents, tasks, and more right from Gmail across your devices. In the new integrated Gmail, you can connect any way you want. Send an email, chat one-on-one or in groups, and start or join a meeting all from Gmail. Collaboration is also easier now. For group projects or teams, you can create a room. Rooms give you a shared space to chat. You can also easily access files that have been shared in the room and keep track of what everyone is working on with a shared task list. You can also edit a shared document with your team and chat about it within the same window, so you can keep the conversation going while you work. And if you need to discuss a topic live, there's no need to switch to Google Calendar and create an event. Just add a video meeting to the room and members can join directly. If you really need to focus, you can turn off notifications so you're not disturbed during important times. And when you search in Gmail, you can see results from your email and your chat messages. You need to complete a few simple steps to start using the new Gmail experience. First, your G Suite admin needs to enable the new experience for your organization.
So I think that's enough of that video, but I think it's a really cool feature. Looking forward to seeing more people use it. The integrated tasks, keep meetings and chat all at once, I think really is going to help people a lot. So please let me know what you guys find out. Chat is trying to kind of be a Slack killer. And then tying it into the rest of the G Suite interface, I think is really quite helpful. All right, next thing I'll mention. So Google Voice, again, I tried to get some permission to talk about some of the things privately, but I will tell you there's some cool stuff coming. So please hold some faith with Google Voice. But as we saw, Google Voice is now integrated in Gmail. Additionally, there's ring groups. So if you're a company and you're using Google Groups, what a ring group is, it basically can ring multiple phones at once. It can do randomization. And if you're using Google Fi, for example, you can now use it on the same account. Before, that was a big problem. If you had Google Fi service and you were using a Pixel phone, you couldn't have a Google Voice number on the same phone. But that's now been fixed. You can also transfer calls to a phone number or to another person, and it's available in Canada. So they're starting to improve their international availability of Google Voice, and I think you'll see some exciting stuff there. Google Contacts, really not too much this year, but they did add a new trash feature. So if you've ever had anybody accidentally delete their contacts, this is a lifesaver. It'll save the contacts for 30 days. It works if they delete it on the mobile or on the desktop, but you can only access the trash on the desktop version. So they delete it on the phone, you've got to log into the web browser and use that interface to get to the trash feature. But still very useful for something that before this wasn't backed up, and you could lose a lot of data very quickly. Google Chat, probably the biggest announcement for this year is you can finally add people outside of your domain. You can create rooms that allow people outside of your domain as well. So you can finally kind of bring in people from other, to work on the project that might be at other companies, or use chat as like a customer facing tool if you're like doing tech support or something like that. So really neat feature there. As I mentioned, I won't talk much about the admin features. I did want to mention, especially when I talk internationally, Google is doing a lot to improve the data regions and the granularity of what data is stored on REST. It turned out they were storing some indices and things like that. So if you're worried about the GDPR, you're worried about the EU data regions, the G Suite administrative ability to set the data region is just continuing to improve. So there's lots of good stuff there, especially because there's actually been some, again, political type of issues with what was called the US Privacy Shield and the EU. That was let lapse. So you might, if you follow it, you might see some weird stuff like Google is falling back to the MCC and things like that. Those are just lots of legalese jargon for how international treaties and things like that are working for this data, and how Google is working to make sure things like GDPR and other privacy rules are handled. And I know privacy and those controls are paramount in Germany. You guys have some of the strongest laws in the world concerning that, so I wanted to mention that specifically. Dark theme, this is, you're seeing Google embrace this more. It's rolling out continuously across the different editors and chat. There's more features coming for it. The nice thing about dark theme is easier on the eyes, especially at night. And it also helps with the battery usage. You're not lighting up all the pixels on the phone. So white text on a black background versus black on a white background can have a pretty substantial amount of battery savings, especially if you ever look at your machine or your phone or whatever, and you look at what's taking all the battery, you'll almost always see screen as like 72% of the battery usage. So this can really heavily impact it. Google Calendar, some great features again this last year and coming up. They added a feature where you can set the default meeting length. Previously it was set to an hour, and if you're like me, I do not like meetings over 20 minutes long. They need to have a reason to exist, and they often do not. So I recommend setting a 20-minute default length and try and get people to set up shorter meetings rather than longer. The nice thing is in the calendar, short meetings now will be slightly smaller in your calendar. Before this, I think they used to block at least an hour of time or half an hour of time on your calendar. And so if you had like 3 20-minute meetings, you couldn't really tell when they were happening during the day. But they've gotten better on that visualization. And additionally, they've gotten much better on that visualization and with color and for the printing capabilities. So you can now, they kind of designed it around the fact that you can print a whole day's worth of events fairly easily in color on a single page piece of paper. So if you're somebody that likes to work off a printed itinerary, that can help a ton. So lots of great features there. Google Sites. So technically we're on the 3rd iteration of Google Sites, but it's still called New Sites. It is in beta now where Vault will support storing the Google Sites. Other than that, the big things that you're seeing is they are supporting 2 main features: domain created templates. So you could have site templates before this. Now you can have domain created templates, and they're also adding a version history with the ability to roll back. So if you go into the version history and don't like it, you can roll back changes that you don't find necessary or you don't like on a page-by-page basis. So really nice granularity there, especially for a tool that is often used for people who aren't web programmers. Jamboards. So for those who haven't seen a Jamboard, I do recommend them. They are really quite cool technology. The price sometimes is a little expensive, but the ability to just whiteboard things very, very rapidly, very, very accurately, store the whiteboard, work on it collaboratively. You don't actually have to buy a Jamboard. That's one of the things I like to tell people. You can use the app jamboard.google.com completely without a Jamboard, and you can collaborate with people on it to create those jams. I think there's a limit, maybe like 20 people. I think they're working on that limit going up. But really great for whiteboarding with teams. And in the current pandemic with work from home, you can still have your sessions, you can still have your Kanban and do your developer whiteboarding and do your scheduling and whatnot with a whiteboard, and Jamboard is great capability to do it. Some of the improvements they have coming in before the end of the year line, you'll be able to draw straight lines. So if you haven't used it, if you write something on a Jamboard and you do it badly, it can actually turn that text. It can do text handwriting analysis and then turn it into actual typed text. They're going to be doing that with straight lines. You're going to be able to zoom in. You're going to be able to create and access a jam offline. So that's kind of cool. And you're going to be able to work with text boxes and shapes. So right now you can type text, but you're going to be able to set a text box. And then Z ordering. So you're going to be able to set things in front of you, other things and whatnot. The Z ordering has in particular been really needed. If you do anything with those type of tools, it's a big problem. So, all right, this one probably of my topics has the most amount of things that I wanted to talk about. We're doing this call is on Hangouts Meet. It's being simultaneously streamed over to Facebook and YouTube. But Google Meet has really stepped up, as have most of your video teleconferencing companies, to try and help people work from home during a pandemic. Schools are running off of it, companies are running off of it, and you're going to see a lot of great features. One of the first things I wanted to let you know is that Google Hangouts Meet is now just known as Google Meet. They've dropped Hangouts. That's all part of their consolidation of Hangouts and their various consumer apps and whatnot into various things. So I think you're going to see Google Meet, you're going to see Google Chat. You're not going to see it called Hangouts Chat or Hangouts Classic or Hangouts Meet. They're going to drop that Hangouts name from it. Additionally, Google, at the moment, through September 30th, you can do all the features of the Enterprise Edition, like recording, though all is a bit wrong. There's one that you can't do, which is annoying to me, but because I want to try it out. But some neat things they've done. So if you haven't tried Google Meet in a dark room, their ability to do low light is impressive. Especially like a Pixel phone with a good low light camera already. It can be very, very useful. They've also added Meet 4x4 grids, so you can see everybody that's on the Meet, 16 people at a time. You can also dial out now to an international phone number. So as they continue this rollout with international support that I talked about, the AI, the adding more countries to the Google Voice, you're going to start to see the ability to use this internationally and really kind of making talking to people internationally very, very inexpensive or free, or just included with the service, I should say, rather than free. You know, in development thing, you know, we talked about Jamboards. They're going to be adding digital whiteboarding with Jamboard integrated into Meet. They're doing things that'll be great for teachers. In fact, I believe the announcement this morning is some of the Google moderation capabilities have been launched for Meet in the education edition of Google G Suite. But you're going to have background and blur and replacement. So if you've seen that where like people look like they're on the beach or at someplace other than their home, Google is adding that to Meets, or just blurring out the background so you don't see things in the background that much. They're adding breakout rooms, polling, Q&A, hand raising. So really just kind of some feature parity, some new features, the Jamboard, really just going to see it be a lot more useful before the end of the year. Hold on 1 second, I've got an alarm going off. So additionally, I showed you the ability to present high quality video and data. So I'm looking forward to using that more with the present in a Chrome tab. It is pretty resource intensive, so it doesn't work particularly well on like one of my low end Chromebooks, but my Pixelbook, my Windows 10 laptop, it works like a charm. And you guys saw me do it internationally. So it's pretty impressive. The one feature that I was saying that I was sad is they have a filter out sound that isn't speech. It's really impressive if you haven't seen the demos of it. They have things, and it just kind of sounds like a little bit of a bee buzz in the background, whereas like I think in the demo, the guy is literally taking a hammer and banging it onto pots and pans while he talks normally, and it works. So, you know, babies crying, dogs barking, pans dropping, etc. will start to go over. They are currently, that's only with the Enterprise Edition, and it's not extended through the September 30th, giving everybody the Meet functionality. I'm hoping they bring this to other features or to other editions of G Suite because it's really, really cool, but they so far haven't. Again, continuing with the AI. Hey Google for Meet hardware. So you can do things now like you can talk to Meet hardware. You can say, hey Google, join a call, dial the phone number, etc. All hands-free. There's lots of commands there. And if anybody here uses Google hardware, you'll know the AI and the assistant. They're just adding features constantly. There's so many of them. A neat feature you can do now is you can also cast Google Meet up to a television. So, you know, for example, you're in your living room, work from home, you can cast it up to the television, see it big. It's going to be great for the Jamboard type of things while you're working on things. Still use your microphone on your phone, but be able to see everybody on the Hangouts Meet up there. I told you it was in development with the moderator controls to give hosts more control. This has to do with things like being able to mute people, giving presentation rights, invite only type of things. That went GA. In fact, the announcement came out this morning. So I'll bring that up and show you kind of how you can see those announcements. We'll talk about that in my resources, etc. And, you know, they already launched the ability that the people who create a Meet and the people that are the calendar owner for the Meet can mute or remove other participants. So this helps with things like unruly students and things like that. They were joining Meets and things like that. So they needed security controls to do that, and they added them pretty quickly to try and hit that problem. My favorite story around that, by the way, was with Zoom, not with Google Meet, but a child who was attending school over Zoom changed his name to Reconnecting so that the teacher didn't realize he was playing hooky from his class. Unfortunately, he misspelled Reconnecting, so he got caught. But I still gave him an A+ for effort on renaming his screen name to Reconnecting, so the teacher wouldn't know he was missing class. All right. So now we're kind of into the resources section that I was talking about earlier. But before we get into the resources, are there any questions, Peter, Paul, or Sam?
Not at the moment, so I think you can proceed, and yeah. But that's a good reminder actually for our viewers that you can feel free to raise any question, and we'll pass it on.
Yeah, and anything Google related, G Suite, programming. I told them I would talk about football / soccer. I'll talk politics. No, I won't really talk politics, etc. So don't hesitate to throw something at me, cybersecurity related as well. But under the resources, what I wanted to do was kind of give you guys some information about how I build this information, and especially, you know, if you don't have an NDA with Google, how can you get some insight into what's going on? How can you stay abreast of this stuff? And some of this is a little bit more lengthy than others, but you know, I'll try and give you things. So first of all, there's two big events for Google. There's Google Next, that's their big event, that's their premier event. This year, because of the pandemic, they have switched it to, I think, an 8-week program. It's called Next on Air. You can see on their blog, they have a complete list of announcements. Everything is available on demand, so you can go view the stuff from the past 7 weeks, etc. if you find something that's particularly interesting. This is their biggest event of the year. I'm really looking forward to going to it back in person, because Google goes to a lot of trouble to have big announcements for this, and I think some of the fanfare was lost without doing the big event. And then for developers, their conference is called Google I/O. That was canceled completely this year. There won't be an on-air version of it. That is not too big a problem. Lately, in the last few years, they've been stealing a lot of the thunder from I/O to have big announcements at Google Next. So if you followed Next, there usually wasn't a whole lot of big announcements at I/O, which was usually held about a month later. But those two are the big things for Google announcements. That's when you're going to see them gearing up for their big announcements and things like that. So Google Next and I/O. And then, like, for example, in consumer electronics, the Consumer Electronics Show, that's where a lot of companies are gearing up to have big announcements in January. So between those three events, you can really have a good idea of what's coming forward for a year with a lot of companies in consumer electronics. For G Suite, there's a couple of resources. So you have the G Suite Updates blog that you can read going back. They also have a help center or a knowledge base that you can go read. That only goes back 6 months, but you can sort it by the specific products. And that's one of the reasons why, for example, when I was preparing this and culling out what I wanted to go over, I used the blog for some of my older information, some of my other slide decks, the information from the roadmap that's under NDA, and then I cross-correlated it all to the help desk and to publicly available documents to confirm what I was able to talk about with you guys. If you want to know about what's coming up with upcoming G Suite releases, there's a link there that I've mentioned. That's linked actually off of the Help Center as well for going back 6 months. And then one of the communities that I'm involved in, I'm a top contributor for, is the Google Cloud Connect community. So that's at cloudconnectcommunity.com. That's an official Google resource for talking about all things G Suite, GCP, etc. So in combination with things like Stack Overflow, it's a great way to talk to other programmers, find out what's going on with GCP. And for people that need to know, you can, especially if you help with larger customers, you can request access to a GCP roadmap and a G Suite roadmap, and you can have some insight into what's going to happen in the next 18 months with Google. So something else to mention there. The Google Suite visible changes. If you have to do things like change management and help your users make sure what's going to happen, the visible changes tries to make sure you're aware of like things that are going to change so that you can let your users know ahead of time. So if you're familiar with things like rapid schedule and the rapid release and the general release schedule, you can keep up to date on this and know what's coming out on the schedule platform, so you can keep things going there. And additionally, if you're like me and you prefer email, you can use the FeedBurner, which is a company Google acquired a bazillion years ago, and you can actually sign up for like Google Apps Updates. You'll notice it's still called Google Apps Updates. They haven't updated it from G Suite, which I think was about, 6-7 years ago. There's also a calendar you can release. So if you like viewing it in a calendar mode, you can load that up and you can see what do you call it? Another thing that I like, if you're training users, they have a wonderful thing for Welcome Center. In fact, I'll go ahead and pull this up for a second. So the Welcome Center is very useful because it has a bunch of things. Not actually on the Welcome Center. Up here, you have things like checklists for new users. You have getting support. You have video training. So if you're looking,
you're still sharing your slides. So if you want to show your browser, you probably need to change your share source.
I did. Thank you, sir. All right, you should be seeing it now.
Yes.
Okay, so in this thing where you can get the 4 new resources, they launched the G Suite Welcome Center in here. That's got some great stuff, checklists for new users so they can walk through what they should do over 5 weeks to become Gmail or G Suite's proficient. They've got video training. Another thing that I really like is if you have users who are a little bit more advanced and they want to learn things, they have a G Suite Power Users. And additionally, they have a kind of a hack, what they're called G Suite Hack. So kind of a programming hack for people that might want to learn things like Google Apps scripting and things like that. So they've got a couple of challenging tasks to take the power users to the next level. So some really great resources there, especially if you're trying to get people to understand the Google ecosystem and what it can bring. That's a really, really great resource I found. I went back to full screen. Sorry, I'm trying to. All right. So the latest news. So if you want to read about everything across Google. So most of what I went through was the G Suite. I did talk about Gmail and various products and things like that that are useful. But if you want to know about everything across Google, you can go to blog.google/products. They'll have everything broken up by different products. And that really is everything. Additionally, if you're interested in hardware from Google, there's a wonderful website called 9to5. And what 9to5 does is they have everything. They cover Pixel, Next, Android, etc. And they break it all under different topics. And finally, if you're specifically interested in Google search and search engine optimization, I love the searchenginejournal.com. They do a really great job of following the changes in Google search engines and the SEO work, because there's all kinds of stuff that you have to learn, like Google Panda and things like that, and verbiage, and they don't always talk about what changes they're going to make. Like, for example, there was a big change this last May with Google SEO that changed how things were ranked, and a lot of people were caught by surprise. You wouldn't have been if you read this journal. They interviewed the actual people that did it. Finally, 2 resources for Google Cloud Platform, which is probably of a lot of interest to the GDG group here that does programming. If you're not familiar with GCP, that is where you can do just standard machine computing, but also what I call products as a service or software as a service offerings that the Google Cloud offers. The interesting thing about that is I refer to it as the Google hexagons of doom. The reason being is that there's well over 100 different hexagons that Google offers. As you can see in the screenshot that I have down below from their logo for GCP, they have things that, it's kind of hard to remember. Well, the one here from a kanji character to A, that's Google Translate. But, what is this one with a little chip with a lightning bolt? What's this one here with an N that's sort of sideways? What's this one here with lines? And this is one of the things that I somewhat don't like about Google, is that they purposely take text out of icons, because the psychology behind it is that your brain can't read an icon and look at an icon at the same time. I preferred it back when it used to have thing underneath it, and it would show, okay, if that's a ship's wheel, that was Kubernetes, or whatnot. So you would know what these various things were. If you had Spanner, it would say Spanner underneath it. But one of the resources that I mentioned that I really like is Google Cloud in 4 words. So I'll go ahead and load this up. Oops, I'm trying to load it up at least. I think I've completely broken everything. Luckily, I have my slides up in 2 places. So I'm going to load up this hexagon, or this is the brochure for the Google in 4 words or less. So you probably can't see this real well, but what you'll see is things like, it'll say Google Firebase, sorry, that's Firestore, Document Store and Sync. So what it does is, this is for developers. And if you want to know, like, you don't know what Firebase is, or you don't know what Apogee is, or you don't know what Anthos is, or you don't know what these various tools are, you can go in and go, okay, Kubernetes blog, well, the kubernetes.io.blog. You can find out what these various products might be and what category they might be. It's now extended to 2 sheets, and you can get an idea, because I frankly can't remember sometimes, what is Google HSM? Oh, that's the hardware and security module, the tool set, et cetera. KMS, I mean, it's just tons of acronyms. Sometimes they use words that don't make sense, or they use things from other things, like, migrate for Anthos. What is Anthos? So in this brochure, it's a great way. It's my tooltip for, okay, what is that tool? Because one of the funny things that at least I found it humorous, is I had a person once come tell me they were going to learn GCP over the summer. And I kind of pointed out to them that there's hundreds, over 100 products underneath GCP. And you could probably pick one and spend 10 years on it and make a very good living and have a career, and never be an expert in it. So many of these tools are built on teams that have worked on things for 20 years. A lot of it is open source software, technology that Google has built over the last 20 years that they've commercialized. And so you got to know. But like, for example, under compute, which is where you can just do lift and shift, they now have a bare metal solution. So if you need to do things that require getting below a hypervisor, you can do that with their bare metal thing. But anyway, I won't go into all the resources that are there. But it is a great tool that Greg's ramblings for the Google Cloud in 4 words. The link will be on here, but you can actually search for Google Cloud in 4 words and find it quite easily. A couple more things, 2 more slides before we do things. So I talked about Graveyard a little earlier. This is stuff since that time period. So Classic Hangouts, as they call it, is now replaced by chat. Additionally, the classic sites will be ended. As of earlier this month, or last month, excuse me, mid last month, they made it so that new sites is the default. And they've gotten rid of the Sheets shared data connector, and they've now created it with what they call connected sheets. Connected sheets integrates with BigQuery. We could go back to our brochure here, for example, and search for BigQuery. I won't tell you, but BigQuery is their monster SQL engine that can do exactly what it sounds like, big queries. And when they say big queries, think Google scale. So a big query can handle 10 billion rows. And that kind of stuff is very, very, very unique in SQL. If you tried to do that on a local SQL server without the resources that Google's thrown behind it, you might wait weeks, months for that type of query to come back. Here you can do it with Google Sheets, tie it into Google BigQuery in the background, and tie it into a whole bunch of sheets that are connected and actually have usable data in seconds. Additionally, on the Graveyard, one of the pandemic things that they've announced is the less secure apps was going to be deprecated. They've delayed that indefinitely right now, just because so many people are working from home, so much upheaval would be caused by it. They just put a pause on it. As a cybersecurity person, I think they made the right decision. I like having cybersecurity, but you've got to make it appropriate for the user and the situation. Otherwise, you get what's called shadow IT, and people will work around it, and that is less secure rather than more secure. So held off. App Maker, I already talked about, and Google Print are going away as well. Those are my 2 really, really sad news from that. But other than that, that's pretty much the insights I can give you into G Suite and Google for what's happened already in 2020, some of the insight of what's going to happen through the rest of 2020. I will leave up my thanks slide larger and just kind of point that out. But I was going to show you one more thing actually before I do that. So I'll hide that for a second. I got to load something up for privacy reasons. So give me a second here. I want to bring up so what I'm going to show you here is Google's announcements, so you can see like what they look like. So this, for example, is one of the, they've made about 7 announcements over the last few days since these slide decks were finished and approved by Google. And so, for example, this is what the feed burner looks like of a tele. So it has G Suite updates. There's 4 updates. So they've added security groups. They're doing new device management. I already told you about the adding present and chat meet moderators now available for education users. And then the coming soon is see read receipts. So they're adding read receipts into Google Chat. So you'll know if somebody, if you send them a direct message, you'll know if they've read it. And you can kind of get some information. You can see what they do in their announcements. And it's pretty useful. Sorry, they use some privacy tracking. So I got to view the images. You can see what the explanations look like. And they publish those. So if you really want to have an idea of what's changing in Google, you can read these and have it delivered to your mailbox with that FeedBurner link that I showed you. So with that said, I will go back here. You should be seeing my thanks slide. I will thank Shoshana at Googler. She's the G Suite Launch Program Manager. She did help me point to some of the resources as well as giving me some insight so that I didn't have to accidentally leak something that I didn't want to. So hopefully we can do a follow-up on this, maybe near the end of the year. I can give you a 10-minute update on what's changed throughout the end of the year. I do think there's some cool stuff with the international and the AI focus. As I mentioned, that's Google's focus for 2020, is improving their international and AI capabilities. Other than that, there's some thanks resources there. And my resources that I listed are where I went and gathered all this information in addition to the private information that I had, but I had to cross-correlate that to publicly available information. So with that, my thanks for inviting me to speak and introduce about Google. I'm still angry that I didn't get a beer, but I'll live. Sam, do we have any questions?
Yes, actually, there was a quest for elaboration on GDPR and the Privacy Shield again with Google Cloud. If you could elaborate exactly on where the data is actually being stored at the moment and the improvements, if there's anything you can say on that.
Sure. Yeah. So the big thing that you get, and let me see if I can show it to you in a decent place. So this one here, so let me close that email. So what we're going to do is let's go into the admin panel, and okay. So what you have under G Suite is you're going to have data region, I think is what it's under. And so what you can do is you can set what your region's policy is and where the data is stored. So right now they only support 2 regions. There are more coming. The regions are the EU and the United States. And then basically with that, there are performance issues as it warns you here. So for example, it won't store data in the CDNs or content delivery network servers in certain countries. It will only store the search indices and things like that over in the other countries. So if you're international, the goals are, what Google's preference is, of course, is that you have no preference, because then Google can bring to bear all of its CDN network and things like that around the world. But, privacy being what it is, and GDPR and things like that, enforcing that type of stuff where data is stored at rest, you can go and pick, Europe. And they've been continuously refining the granularity of what data is stored, how it's transmitted, things like that, and not using the CDNs. And that's the CDNs is especially what they talk about with the fact that you'll have performance trade-offs, and that it only covers certain core data. And both of these learn more under the data regions policies will take you into fairly detailed information about those. Additionally, as I mentioned, once you click these buttons, there's a thing down here that says it takes time, because basically Google is going to start something in the background to move all the data to one data region only. So does that answer the question?
I think it answers it very well.
Okay.
Then there was another one regarding Jamboard, if it's connected directly to G Drive.
Yes. So a Jamboard is technically, I would start viewing it as just another editor. And so let's see if I can show you. So Jamboard.com. You can go to a Jamboard. This is my sandbox, by the way, so that's why I can safely show it. You can hit plus, and it'll create a jam. And right now, I believe the jams are only surfaced through the Jamboard application, but they're stored in Drive in the background, and whatnot. And you can do things like, let's see if my eyesight is not particularly good. That's why you sometimes see me squinting at the screen. But you can do things like just draw. Yeah, that's my name in cursive. There's things like where you can, if you're using a real Jamboard, it can do text recognition and whatnot. You can add sticky notes like here. Sorry, that's not this one. You can add a sticky note. So, like, GDG on Friday, which I didn't spell correctly, but the point is you have little sticky notes. You can drag them. You can rotate them. There is a way to rotate them, but here it is, sorry. You can rotate them, you can stick them in the corner. And if I was to invite you to this, in fact, let me see if I can go ahead and do it. Let's put it to change link. Let's do it to anyone with the link. Done. Let's do that. Let's go ahead and I don't know if I can post this in the chat easily, but I know that's being streamed, so I'll put it over here. And I'll put it down here. So if anybody wants to go and click on that link and join the jam in real time, would be kind of interesting just to see it. And then somebody could fix my misspelling on GDG, for example. So we've got Anonymous Leopard or something that has joined. So if you guys want to go ahead and kind of do the jam, you can see that it's kind of an interactive whiteboard that multiple people can do. You can also notice you can open it on a real Jamboard, but a Jamboard's not needed. To use this feature, think of it as a digital interactive jam. You can have up here, you'll notice you can have multiple frames. So it's kind of like, imagine you had a room with 10 whiteboards on it. You can go to all those different whiteboards. You can do, as I mentioned, text boxes now, but you can only do text. You can start to resize it and things like that. So now you can do test and things like that. So they'll have better text box coming. And you can also do a laser pointer. So I can say like, okay, you can pay attention to this over here and you see the bright red thing. So everybody working on the collaborative thing would see that red dot on their screen. So you can point to things and walk people through things as you're doing, what I would call traditional whiteboarding.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, and if we go call this GDG Jam and then go to Drive, let's go see if it surfaces or not. It didn't used to, but I know they're working towards doing it.
You could already see it in the preview, actually.
Yeah, so they have, and it's got the little icon. So Jamboard is basically becoming just another editor, if you will. Joining doc sheets and slides is something else you can do. And they're adding the offline abilities, so you'll be able to eventually, you'll see something like that little cloud icon I was showing you earlier. And somebody else who's on this, go ahead and did I give you guys edit rights, or did I only say you could view it?
We do only have read rights right now, so
let me change that. So
yes, perfect.
All right, please do keep it work appropriate. This is being recorded, but if some people, you should have edit rights now if you want to go ahead and try and make some changes on it. Very nice. Somebody must be left-handed. It was interesting to see an S drawn that way. Yeah. And you can see,
clumsy.
yeah, and you can see like I can move. Whoops, sorry. I can edit stuff, but people can move different things. So, like for example, I can pick Paul's thing, decide it needs to be over here. So you can see this could be a great Kanban type of thing if you want to set a schedule for a project in standard Kanban. I told you not to remind me of beer.
So maybe you can also show the different frames that you can have, because this was very helpful for us while we were doing agile retrospectives.
Yes.
You can have several frames there and then just switch.
Yeah. So you'll notice. So I'm gonna hit the right button here on mine. It's gonna create another blank frame. But now I can go back and I've got the other one. So it's kind of like, okay, and people can keep working on the different frames. So you could have, like, for example, 7 of them, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, etc. And you could have your Kanbans for the different days, etc. You can drag the stuff between the frames. You can clear the frame. So I think I can't remember if it's unlimited or up to 13. There used to be a kind of an arbitrary number. Now it looks like it's almost unlimited now. Yeah. I don't know if you can delete a frame once you've created one, but the nice part about this, especially, like if anybody works in an office, the nice part about Jamboards is you put one in a conference room, people can have a meeting, they can jam on the whiteboard, and then people can come in and say, okay, your hour's up in the conference room. It's our turn for the conference room. And you can say, no problem. You save the jam and you guys can go back to your desks and work on it. And somebody else can use the Jamboard. So one Jamboard in a company it can really be amazing. And it can do things like, for example, I saw somebody draw a beer here. You saw me draw my handwriting. It can do things like, for example, on the Jamboard itself, you draw a beer and it'll come up with a pictography type of database, and it'll give you little pictures of a beer, and you can drag the picture of a beer out. Or you draw Kevin and it will change that into text automatically for you, so that you don't have your script scratch with bad handwriting and whatnot on it. But when you're in front of a computer, it's just as easy, I think, to type. So quite cool stuff.
Cool. Cam,
yeah,
thank
you
so
think a lot
much.
of people didn't realize this was available to without a Jamboard. I think a lot of people didn't realize that.
Yeah, actually, someone asked the same question in the YouTube comment. Thanks for pointing that out again. So that's very helpful.
Yes, and whoever drew the beer being poured, kudos. Well done. So.
Okay. Thank you so much, Kevin. It was a lot of information, and we would really love to have a recap of 2020 and outlook for 21, for example. So I think there's a lot more topics that you could cover. I know from the recommendation of topics that you gave us in advance, so we were able to pick from those. Thanks again. You have a variety of topics, so I am sure we can welcome you again for a new Tech Talk. And one thing I would like to mention is that there will be an EMEA Next conference. It will be virtually, but this will start end of September. So if anybody's looking out for more updates from Google, this will be a Google Next EMEA. And we'll let you know as soon as we have a web page or whatever about this conference. Then we will share it with our meetup groups.
Yeah. So, and for those who don't know, EMEA is Europe, Middle East, and Asia. I have a feeling you're not going to see much different content from the Google Next on Air that's being done for the US. So, I wouldn't wait. I would go start looking at the Google Next on Air now.
Okay, cool. So thank you very much, and we hope to see you soon. We'll follow up, and you also shared your contact information, so it seems you are pretty open for people to connect with you on LinkedIn and so on.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah,
awesome.
so please reach out, and I'll publish the slides there a little later. I'll clean up the resources mess up that I made, and I'll email Paul and Alina the slides so they can share them as well with the group directly. But you can find them on LinkedIn, and you'll be able to find them on McGrail.com under the download section too.
Okay. Thanks a lot, Kevin. And for all of you, we will see you again next month with a new Tech Talk, first Friday of the month. Just join our meetup group, Tech Talk and Beer, and we'll invite you to the next events. Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks for Sam. Thank you, Sam, as well.
Yeah.